I can't go back to you, my friend. Don't even ask, don't play pretend.
I had been on the road for 3 long weeks, hauling goods across state lines, with nothing but the hum of the engine and the occasional radio chatter to keep me company. Trucking was a lonely job, but it paid well, and I always looked forward to coming home to Diana. She was my anchor, my reason to keep pushing through the endless miles. So when I found out I could make it back a day early, I was over the moon. I didn't tell her. I wanted it to be a surprise. Little did I know, the surprise was on me. As I pulled into our driveway, the sun was setting, casting a golden hue over our modest suburban home. I parked the truck and quietly made my way to the front door, imagining the look of delight on Diana's face when she saw me. The thought of her smile warmed my heart and quickened my steps. I slipped my key into the lock, turned it slowly, and pushed the door open. The house was eerily quiet. Usually, by this time, Diana would be in the kitchen, cooking dinner or watching one of her favorite TV shows in the living room. But today, there was no sound of sizzling pans or the TV's muffled voices. My curiosity turned into a slight unease as I walked further in, my boots barely making a sound on the polished wooden floor. Then I heard it, faint murmurs coming from upstairs. My heart pounded in my chest as I climbed the staircase, the creaking steps betraying my presence. I reached our bedroom door, slightly ajar, and pushed it open. What I saw made my blood run cold. There on our bed was Diana, and with her, in a compromising position, was my boss, Jim. For a moment, time stood still. The shock hit me like a freight train, and I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. Diana. Jim? I managed to choke out, my voice barely a whisper. Diana's head snapped up, her eyes wide with horror. Steve. Jim, who was quicker to recover, sneered at me, his arrogance as palpable as the betrayal I felt. Steve, it's not what it looks like, he said, his voice dripping with insincerity. Not what it looks like. I repeated, my voice rising with each word. It looks like my wife and my boss are having an affair in my own bed. Diana scrambled to cover herself, tears streaming down her face. Steve, please, let me explain. Explain? I echoed, feeling the rage boiling inside me. What is there to explain, Diana? How long has this been going on? Jim stood up, buttoning his shirt with deliberate slowness, his expression unrepentant. Steve, calm down. You're overreacting. Overreacting. I roared, feeling a surge of uncontrollable anger. You think finding my wife in bed with another man, my boss, no less, is something I should be calm about. I couldn't stand to be in that room another second. My eyes landed on my jacket, draped over a chair. I grabbed it with trembling hands, the rage and betrayal swirling in my head like a violent storm. Without another word, I turned and bolted out of the room, ignoring Diana's desperate cries for me to stop. As I stormed down the stairs and out the front door, my vision blurred with tears of fury and heartbreak. I barely registered the sound of the door slamming behind me. I jumped into my truck, started the engine, and sped away, my mind a chaotic mess of thoughts and emotions. My reckless driving matched my frantic state. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to get away. The betrayal cut deep, and every mile I drove only seemed to amplify the pain. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Lost in my turmoil, I didn't notice the curve in the road until it was too late. I swerved violently, the truck skidding out of control. There was a sickening crunch of metal and glass, and everything went black. In that moment, I had no idea how much my life was about to change. The accident, the hospital, the long road to recovery, all of it was yet to come. All I knew was that the life I thought I had was shattered, and nothing would ever be the same again. The first thing I became aware of was a dull, throbbing pain that seemed to echo through every part of my body. It was as if I had been put through a meat grinder, and each movement sent waves of agony crashing over me. I tried to open my eyes, but my eyelids felt like they were weighed down with lead. Gradually, with immense effort, I managed to lift them just enough to be blinded by the harsh, fluorescent lights above. Blinking against the glare, I saw the blurred shapes of medical equipment and white walls. The antiseptic smell of a hospital filled my nostrils, and the beeping of machines provided a steady rhythm, grounding me in this new, painful reality. My head was foggy, and it took several minutes before I could make sense of where I was. A soft voice broke through the haze. "Mr. Hammond, can you hear me?" I turned my head slightly, wincing at the pain. A nurse stood beside my bed, her face kind but professional. "You've been in an accident," she said gently. "You're in the hospital. My name is Emily, and I've been taking care of you." "Accident?" I croaked, my throat dry and raspy. Emily nodded. "Yes, you were in a car accident. You've been in a medically induced coma for 2 weeks. You have multiple fractures, but you're stable now. Do you remember what happened?" I closed my eyes, trying to piece together the fragments of my memory. Bits and pieces started to come back. Diana, Jim, the betrayal, the anger, and then speeding down the road, not caring where I ended up. The realization hit me hard, and I felt a lump form in my throat. "The accident," I whispered, more to myself than to Emily. "I remember bits of it." Emily adjusted the drip attached to my arm, her movements calm and reassuring. "You're in good hands, Mr. Hammond. The doctors have done everything they can to stabilize you, and now it's just a matter of healing and rehabilitation." The door to my room opened, and another figure entered. It was Dr. Patel, the attending physician. He walked over to my bedside, his expression serious but compassionate. "Mr. Hammond, I'm Dr. Patel. I've been overseeing your care since you were admitted. How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck," I replied weakly, attempting a small, humorless smile. Dr. Patel chuckled softly. "That's to be expected. You've been through quite an ordeal. You have several broken ribs, a fractured leg, and some internal injuries. But the good news is that you're stable now, and with time and rehabilitation, you should make a full recovery." I nodded, trying to absorb everything he was saying. What about my job? My life?" Dr. Patel exchanged a glance with Emily before looking back at me. "One step at a time, Mr. Hammond. Right now, your priority is to focus on your recovery. Everything else can wait. We'll have a social worker come by to discuss your situation and help you plan for the future." As the doctor continued to explain my treatment plan, my mind wandered back to the moments before the accident. The rage I felt, the betrayal, it all seemed so distant now, overshadowed by the immediate need to heal. But I knew that once the physical pain subsided, I would have to face the emotional turmoil that awaited me. Emily gave me a reassuring smile. "You're strong, Mr. Hammond. We're here to help you through this. If you need anything, just press the call button." "Okay." "Thank you," I murmured, feeling a bit of comfort in her words. As they left the room, I stared up at the ceiling, my body aching and my mind racing. The road to recovery stretched out before me, daunting and uncertain. But as I lay there, I made a silent promise to myself. I would get through this. I would rebuild my life, piece by piece, no matter how long it took. The accident might have broken my body, but it hadn't broken my spirit. And that was something worth fighting for. I had been drifting in and out of consciousness, the pain medication making it difficult to keep track of time. Each time I woke, it was to the dim lighting and soft peeps of the hospital room, my body a constant reminder of the accident. But today was different. As my eyes fluttered open, I saw a familiar face by my bedside. It was Diana, her expression a mixture of worry and guilt. "Diana." My voice was weak, barely more than a whisper. The sight of her stirred a complex mix of emotions: anger, hurt, and a faint trace of longing for the days when things were simpler. She leaned forward, her eyes brimming with tears. "Steve, thank God you're awake. I've been so worried." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Worried. You've been worried. The bitterness in my voice was palpable. You didn't seem so worried when I walked in on you with Jim. Diana flinched as if I had slapped her. Steve, please. I can explain. Explain? I repeated, my voice rising despite the pain it caused. What is there to explain, Diana? I sought everything. How long has this been going on? She hesitated, looking down at her hands. A few months, she finally admitted, her voice barely audible. A few months, I echoed, feeling the betrayal deepen. How could you do this to us, Diana? To me. Tears streamed down her face. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. We were having problems, and Jim was there. He listened when you were away all the time. Problems. I shook my head, wincing at the sharp pain that followed. Everyone has problems, Diana. That doesn't mean you run off and cheat, especially not with my boss. She reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away, the movement sending another wave of pain through me. Steve, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. Well, you did, I snapped, the anger giving me a momentary burst of energy. You shattered everything. Our marriage, our trust, it's all gone. Diana's shoulders shook with silent sobs. I know I've ruined everything, but please, can't we find a way to fix this? I closed my eyes, the weight of her words pressing down on me. I don't know, Diana. Right now, all I can think about is the betrayal. How am I supposed to move past that? She sat back, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. I love you, Steve. Despite everything, I still love you. I opened my eyes and looked at her, searching for any trace of the woman I once adored. But all I could see was the pain and the betrayal. Love? If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken words and unresolved pain. Finally, she stood up, her movements slow and deliberate. I'll give you some space, but please, Steve, think about us. About what we had. As she turned to leave, I felt a pang of something I couldn't quite identify. Regret, maybe. Or perhaps it was the ghost of the love we once shared. But it was fleeting, quickly overshadowed by the raw wound of betrayal. When the door closed behind her, I was left alone with my thoughts. The room felt colder, emptier without her, but I couldn't bring myself to care. The future seemed bleak and uncertain, like a path shrouded in fog. I knew the road to recovery would be long and arduous, not just physically, but emotionally. Diana's betrayal was a wound that would take much longer to heal than any of my broken bones. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I made another silent promise to myself. I would focus on getting better, on putting the pieces of my life back together. Whether Diana would be a part of that future was something I couldn't decide now. All I knew was that the pain of her betrayal was still too fresh, too raw. Forgiveness, if it ever came, was a long way off. The days following my confrontation with Diana were a blur of physical therapy sessions and endless consultations with doctors. My body was slowly mending, but the emotional wounds were still raw and festering. Amid the turmoil, I knew I needed to take control of at least one aspect of my chaotic life. That's when I decided to contact Tim Delaney, a lawyer known for his tenacity in handling tough cases. Tim arrived at the hospital one crisp morning, his presence immediately filling the room with a sense of purpose and determination. He was a tall man in his 40s, with sharp features and a no-nonsense demeanor that made it clear he meant business. Mr. Hammond, he greeted me, extending a firm handshake. I'm Tim Delaney. I understand you've had a rough time lately. I nodded, trying to sit up straighter despite the pain. You could say that. Tim pulled up a chair and sat down, pulling out a notepad. I've reviewed some preliminary information about your accident and your employer's potential negligence. I'd like to hear your account of what happened, in as much detail as you can manage. I took a deep breath and began recounting the events of that fateful day. The confrontation with Diana, the anger and heartbreak that drove me to leave the house, and the subsequent crash. Tim listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes, but mostly letting me talk uninterrupted. "So, you're saying the truck was due for maintenance, but it wasn't serviced properly?" Tim asked, his eyes narrowing as he focused on a particular point. "That's right," I confirmed. "George, the head mechanic, told me they'd been putting off replacing a crucial part. Management wanted to keep the truck on the road despite the risks." Tim leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "This is a clear case of negligence. If the company knowingly ignored necessary maintenance, they put you, and potentially others, at risk. We can definitely build a strong case around this." I felt a flicker of hope for the first time in weeks. "What's our next step?" Tim smiled, a confident, reassuring smile that made me feel like I had chosen the right man for the job. "We'll start by gathering all the relevant documentation, maintenance records, internal communications, anything that shows the company was aware of the truck's condition and chose to ignore it. We'll also need your medical records to detail the extent of your injuries and the ongoing treatment you'll require." He paused, looking me directly in the eye. "Steve, this won't be easy. These cases can drag on, and the company will fight tooth and nail to avoid responsibility. But I promise you this, I'll fight harder. We'll get you the compensation you deserve for your medical expenses and lost income." A sense of relief washed over me. For the first time since the accident, I felt like I had some measure of control over my future. "Thank you, Tim. I really appreciate it." Tim stood up, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "We're in this together, Steve. I'll be in touch soon with the next steps. In the meantime, focus on your recovery. We're going to need you strong for the battle ahead." As Tim left the room, I couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of purpose. The road to recovery was still long, and the emotional scars from Diana's betrayal would take time to heal, but at least now I had a tangible goal to work towards. The legal battle would be arduous, but with Tim Delaney by my side, I felt confident that justice would prevail. Over the next few days, Tim kept his word. He was in constant communication, updating me on the progress of our case. We gathered evidence, spoke to witnesses, and compiled a mountain of paperwork to support our claim. The process was exhausting, both physically and mentally, but it was a necessary step in reclaiming my life. One afternoon, as Tim was visiting to review some documents, he looked up from his notes and asked, "How are you holding up, Steve? This kind of stress can take a toll, especially when you're already dealing with so much." I appreciated his concern. "It's tough, Tim. I won't lie. But having this fight, this goal, it's helping. It gives me something to focus on." He nodded, a look of respect in his eyes. "You're stronger than you realize, Steve. We're going to get through this, one step at a time." As I lay back in my hospital bed that night, I reflected on Tim's words. The journey ahead was uncertain and fraught with challenges, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. I was no longer just a victim of circumstances. I was taking charge of my destiny, determined to see justice served. The days in the hospital had turned into weeks, each one blending into the next. My physical recovery was progressing, albeit slowly, but the emotional wounds were still fresh and raw. The betrayal I felt from Diana was a constant ache that I couldn't shake. My lawyer, Tim Delaney, had been making steady progress with our legal case, and I was finally beginning to see a sliver of light at the end of the tunnel. Then, one morning, my room was invaded by a whirlwind of emotion. Diana burst in, her face flushed and eyes red with tears. She was clutching a stack of papers in her hand, her fingers trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. "Steve, how could you?" she cried, her voice cracking. "How could you send me these?" She held up the divorce papers as if they were a weapon. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for the confrontation I knew was inevitable. "Diana, we need to talk about this," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "Talk? You want to talk now, after sending these?" She threw the papers onto the bed, her tears flowing freely. I know I made a mistake, but can't we find a way to move past this? We were supposed to be a team, Steve. We promised each other forever. I looked at her, my heart heavy with conflicting emotions. Diana, your betrayal cut deeper than any physical injury. I can't just forget what I saw that day. I can't pretend that everything is okay. She sank into the chair beside my bed, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I love you, Steve. I know I hurt you, but I still love you. Please, don't do this. Don't end us. I closed my eyes, trying to find the right words. Diana, I loved you too. I thought we had something unbreakable, but you broke it. You broke us, and I can't just put the pieces back together. She reached out, her hand hovering over mine, but not quite touching. Can't we at least try? Counseling, therapy, anything. I don't want to lose you. I opened my eyes and met her gaze, my expression resolute. Diana, I can't move past this. Every time I look at you, I'm reminded of that moment. I can't live like that. You deserve to find happiness, and so do I, but we won't find it together. Her face crumpled, and she let out a heartbreaking sob. So this is it. You're just going to throw everything away. I felt a pang of regret, but I knew I had to stand firm. It's not about throwing it away. It's about recognizing that some things can't be fixed. I'm asking you to leave Diana. Find your own path, find your own happiness. But I need to do the same. She stood up, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. I don't know how to be without you, she whispered. You'll find a way, I said softly. We both will. Diana took a shaky breath and nodded, her face a mask of pain and resignation. I hope you find what you're looking for, Steve. I really do. I hope the same for you, I replied, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. She turned and walked to the door, pausing for a moment before stepping out of my life. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and I was left alone in the quiet of the hospital room. It was a painful moment, but I knew it was necessary for my own healing. As I lay back against the pillows, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the decision I had made. Divorce was never something I had envisioned for us, but Diana's betrayal had shattered the foundation of our marriage. Moving forward without her was the only way I could begin to heal. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with legal battles and the challenges of rebuilding my life. But in that moment, I felt a sense of closure. I had taken the first step towards reclaiming my future, and while it was painful, it was also liberating. I knew that healing would take time, but at least now, I was on the right path. The sterile smell of the hospital gradually became a constant reminder of my ongoing battle. Each day was a test of endurance, not just physically but emotionally. Physical therapy sessions were brutal, but they offered a glimmer of hope, a tangible goal to strive towards as I navigated the maze of pain and recovery. My physical therapist, Karen, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with a heart of gold. She pushed me hard, never letting me give in to the temptation of self-pity. "Come on, Steve, you can do better than that," Karen said one morning, her voice firm but encouraging. "You've made progress, but we're not there yet. One more set." Sweat dripped from my forehead as I struggled to lift the dumbbells. Every movement sent waves of pain through my fractured body, but I gritted my teeth and pushed through. "I'm trying, Karen," I panted, my arms trembling. "I know you are," she said, her expression softening. "And you're doing great. Just remember, every bit of progress counts. You're stronger than you think." Her words, simple as they were, became a mantra I clung to during the toughest moments. Each day, I found a little more strength, a little more resolve. The physical pain was a constant reminder of my accident, but it was also a symbol of my survival and determination to reclaim my life. Meanwhile, Tim Delaney's visits provided a mental and emotional anchor. His unwavering dedication to my case was a source of immense comfort. He was meticulous, strategic, and always one step ahead. We spent hours poring over documents, preparing for what would undoubtedly be a fierce legal battle. One afternoon, Tim arrived with a stack of papers and a determined look. "Steve, I've got some updates for you," he said, setting the papers down on the small table by my bed. I shifted, trying to sit up straighter. "Good news, I hope." "Mostly," he replied, pulling up a chair. "We've gathered substantial evidence showing your employer's negligence. Maintenance records, internal emails, witness statements. It's all pointing in our favor." I felt a surge of hope. "That's great to hear. Do we have a timeline for when this might go to court?" Tim nodded. "We're pushing for a court date as soon as possible, but these things can take time. In the meantime, I need you to focus on your recovery. The stronger you are, the better our chances." I appreciated his honesty. "I'm doing my best. Karen's been a tough coach, but it's paying off." Tim smiled. "Good to hear. Now there's one more thing we need to discuss. Your testimony. It's going to be crucial, and I want you to be prepared." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "I understand. Just tell me what I need to do." Tim leaned forward, his expression serious. "We'll go over the details in depth, but the key is to be honest and clear. Stick to the facts, and don't let the defense rattle you. We'll practice, and I'll make sure you're ready." As we delved into the intricacies of the case, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of resolve. This legal battle wasn't just about compensation. It was about holding my employer accountable for their negligence and ensuring this didn't happen to someone else. In the evenings, after the therapy sessions and legal preparations, I often found myself reflecting on the past few months. The accident had shattered my world, but it had also given me a renewed sense of purpose. I was determined to rebuild my life, piece by piece. One night, as I lay in bed, Karen popped her head in the door. "Steve, I've been thinking. You've come a long way, and I'm proud of you. But remember, this journey isn't just about physical strength. It's about finding that inner strength too." I looked at her, grateful for her unwavering support. "Thanks, Karen. I'm learning that every day." "Good," she said with a smile, "because you're not just fighting for yourself anymore. You're setting an example for others. Keep that in mind, and you'll get through this." Her words stayed with me long after she left. They became a beacon of light in the darkest moments, reminding me that my journey was about more than just recovery. It was about resilience, hope, and the unwavering human spirit. As the days turned into weeks, my strength slowly returned. Each session with Karen, each meeting with Tim, brought me closer to reclaiming my life. The road ahead was still fraught with challenges, but I faced it with a renewed sense of determination and resolve. The legal battle was just beginning, but I was ready. With Tim's guidance and Karen's relentless support, I knew I had the strength to see it through. The path to justice was long, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was walking it with purpose and hope. The sterile scent of the hospital was slowly being replaced by the familiar, more hopeful smell of recovery and anticipation. My physical therapy was yielding results, and Tim's relentless pursuit of justice had injected a sense of purpose into my daily routine. Every session with Karen, every meeting with Tim, fortified my resolve. It was during one of these meetings that Tim arrived with a heavy, worn briefcase, his face a mix of triumph and concern. I knew he had something significant to share. "Steve," Tim said, setting the briefcase down and pulling out a thick stack of documents. "We've uncovered something big." I adjusted myself in the hospital bed, curiosity piqued. "What is it, Tim?" He handed me a few papers to look over. "We've been digging into the company's financials and maintenance records. What we found is, well, it's damning. Your boss has been involved in extensive fraud and embezzlement for years." I looked through the documents, the details starting to make sense. There were suspicious transactions, altered records, and a clear pattern of money being siphoned off. My boss had used his position to cover his tracks, creating a facade of legitimate business operations while lining his own pockets. "This is incredible," I said, my voice tinged with a mix of shock and anger. "How did he get away with this for so long?" Tim nodded, his expression serious. "He was clever, I'll give him that. But not clever enough. He relied on people's trust and the chaos of a busy company to hide his tracks. However, with the right resources and persistence, we were able to uncover the truth." I looked up from the papers, a newfound determination in my eyes. "This changes everything, doesn't it?" "Absolutely," Tim replied. "This evidence significantly strengthens our case. Not only does it show negligence in your accident, but it also reveals a deeper level of corruption within the company." I clenched my fists, feeling a surge of righteous anger. He betrayed all of us, not just me. Every employee, every stakeholder, they were all deceived. Tim nodded. "Exactly. And now we have the means to hold him accountable. But we need to proceed carefully. The evidence is strong, but we need to build an airtight case to ensure justice is served." As we continued to review the documents, the extent of my boss's deceit became clear. He had manipulated accounts, forged signatures, and even created fake companies to funnel the money through. The depth of his betrayal was staggering, and it only fueled my determination to see him brought to justice. The next morning, Tim returned with more updates. "Steve, I've spoken with a forensic accountant. She's confirmed that the fraud is even more extensive than we initially thought. We're talking millions of dollars over several years." I shook my head in disbelief. I can't believe he did this. And all while pretending to be a trustworthy boss. Tim's expression hardened. People like him rely on that trust to get away with their schemes. But we have the upper hand now. The evidence is clear, and it's only a matter of time before he faces the consequences. We spent the next few days meticulously going through the evidence, preparing for the legal battle ahead. The more we uncovered, the stronger our case became. The thought of facing my boss in court, of seeing him held accountable for his actions, gave me a sense of purpose and resolve I hadn't felt in months. One afternoon, as we were reviewing the final pieces of evidence, Tim looked at me with a determined glint in his eye. "Steve, we're ready. This is going to be a tough fight, but we have a solid case. Are you prepared for what's to come?" I met his gaze, feeling the weight of the journey ahead, but also the strength of my determination. "I'm ready, Tim. Let's make sure justice is served." As we prepared for the upcoming legal battle, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. The discovery of my boss's fraud had transformed our case from a simple accident claim into a fight against deep-rooted corruption. It wasn't just about compensation anymore. It was about holding those who abused their power accountable. With Tim's expertise and the overwhelming evidence we had gathered, I felt confident in our chances. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control of my destiny. The legal battle would be long and arduous, but I was ready to face it head-on, driven by the desire to see justice served and to reclaim my life from the wreckage of deceit and betrayal. The morning of the trial dawned gray and heavy, matching the weight of the anticipation in my chest. Tim and I walked into the courthouse together, his presence a steadying force. The air inside was tense, a silence punctuated only by the hushed whispers of the spectators and the clicking of shoes against the polished floors. The courtroom itself felt imposing. The judge's bench loomed at the front, and the rows of wooden pews were slowly filling with people, some curious, others directly involved. As we took our seats, I glanced at the defense table. My boss sat there, his usual smug demeanor replaced by a veneer of nervous confidence. His lawyer, a sharp-faced man with a reputation for winning difficult cases, was already rifling through his notes. Tim leaned over and whispered, "Stay calm, Steve. We have a solid case. Just let the evidence speak for itself." I nodded, gripping the armrests of my chair. The judge, a stern woman with an air of authority, entered the room. The trial was about to begin. The opening statements set the tone. Tim's words were clear and powerful, laying out the story of my accident, the employer's negligence, and the uncovered fraud with a clarity that left no room for doubt. The defense's opening, by contrast, was filled with attempts to mitigate and obscure, casting doubt where there was none to be found. Tim called our first witness, a forensic accountant who had meticulously analyzed the company's financial records. "Ms. Carter, can you explain the discrepancies you found in the company's accounts?" Tim asked, his voice steady. Ms. Carter, a woman in her early 40s with a precise and confident manner, adjusted her glasses and began. "Over the course of several years, I discovered multiple instances of unauthorized transfers and falsified records. These actions were clearly designed to embezzle funds from the company." She presented document after document, each one a piece of the intricate puzzle of fraud. The judge listened intently, her expression revealing nothing. Next, Tim called me to the stand. I recounted the day of the accident, the shock of discovering Diana's betrayal, and the moments leading up to my crash. "Mr. Hammond," Tim said gently, "can you describe your state of mind that day?" I took a deep breath. I was devastated, angry, and confused. Finding my wife with my boss was a shock I wasn't prepared for. I acted impulsively, and that led to the accident. The defense lawyer stood up, a predator ready to pounce. "Mr. Hammond, isn't it true that you were speeding at the time of the accident?" I met his gaze. Yes, I was. I wasn't thinking clearly. He smirked, turning to the judge. No further questions. Tim then called other employees from the company, each one testifying to the irregularities they'd noticed but were too afraid to report. Their testimonies painted a picture of a workplace under the shadow of corruption and fear. As the days went on, the defense tried to poke holes in our case, but Tim countered every move with precision and confidence. His cross-examinations were sharp, and his ability to present complex information clearly was impressive. The turning point came when we presented the surveillance footage. It showed my boss entering and leaving offices late at night, accessing files he had no business accessing. His attempts to explain it away were weak, and the jury could see through his lies. In one particularly heated exchange, Tim confronted my boss on the stand. "Mr. Seward, can you explain why these transfers happened only on days when you had exclusive access to the company's accounts?" My boss shifted uncomfortably. I was following company protocol. Tim's eyes narrowed. "Company protocol doesn't include embezzling millions of dollars. Isn't it true that you created fake companies to siphon off funds?" My boss stammered. I don't recall." Tim held up a document. "This is your signature on one of those transfers. Are you saying you don't recall signing it?" The courtroom was silent. My boss looked at the document, then at the judge, then back at Tim. No, I don't recall." The judge's expression grew stern. "Mr. Seward, you are under oath. Please answer the question truthfully." He wilted under the pressure, finally mumbling, "Yes, I signed it." That admission was the final nail in the coffin. As the trial progressed, the weight of the evidence became undeniable. Each day brought us closer to the resolution I so desperately needed. On the final day, the closing statements were given. Tim's closing was passionate and clear, a call for justice for the betrayal and harm I had suffered. The defense's final attempt to sway the jury fell flat, the evidence too overwhelming to ignore. As the jury deliberated, I sat with Tim, the tension almost unbearable. When they finally returned, the verdict was unanimous. My employer was found guilty of negligence and fraud. The judge looked directly at my boss. "Mr. Seward, your actions have caused significant harm. This court finds you guilty of all charges. You will be held accountable for your actions." A sense of relief washed over me. Justice had been served. Tim squeezed my shoulder, a victorious smile on his face. "We did it, Steve." I nodded, tears of relief and triumph in my eyes. "Yeah, we did." As we left the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The battle had been grueling, but it had brought us to this moment of vindication. With Tim by my side, I knew I could face whatever came next. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the judge delivered the final verdict. The gavel fell with a resounding thud, and the room erupted into a mix of cheers and sighs of relief. My heart pounded in my chest as I listened to the judge's words. "Mr. Hammond, the court finds in your favor. Your employer is hereby ordered to pay a substantial settlement to cover your medical expenses and lost income. Furthermore, they will be held accountable for their negligence and fraud." It was a moment of triumph, a validation of all the pain and struggle I had endured. As the reality of the verdict sank in, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Tim's firm handshake and proud smile conveyed his satisfaction with the outcome. "We did it, Steve," he said, his voice filled with pride. "You stood your ground, and justice was served." I nodded, gratitude swelling in my chest. "Thank you, Tim. I couldn't have done it without you." With the legal battle behind me, I turned my focus to rebuilding my life. The settlement provided a sense of security, allowing me to finally breathe easy after months of uncertainty. I returned home with a newfound sense of purpose, eager to embrace the possibilities of a fresh start. Reconnecting with my family was my first priority. My parents enveloped me in tight hugs, their relief palpable. We shared tears of joy and laughter, basking in the warmth of each other's presence. "It's good to have you back, son," my dad said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's good to be back," I replied, smiling through tears. As the days turned into weeks, I began to find joy in small, everyday moments again. I savored the simple pleasures of home-cooked meals, leisurely walks in the park, and heartfelt conversations with loved ones. The scars of the past began to fade as I embraced the promise of a brighter future. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, Diana appeared in the doorway. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and her expression was filled with remorse. "Steve, I know I can't undo what I've done," she began, her voice wavering. "But I want you to know that I'm truly sorry. I never meant to hurt you." I met her gaze, my heart heavy with the weight of our shared pain. "I know, Diana, and I forgive you." Her eyes widened in surprise, tears welling up once more. You do." I nodded, a sense of peace settling over me. "Yes, holding on to anger and resentment won't change what happened. We both made mistakes, but we can choose to learn from them and move forward." Diana stepped forward, her hand reaching out tentatively. I took it in mine, a silent promise of forgiveness and healing passing between us. As the days turned into months, I found solace in the rhythm of everyday life. I immersed myself in work, pouring my energy into my passion for trucking. The open road became my sanctuary, a place where I could find peace and clarity amid the chaos of the world. The settlement provided financial stability, allowing me to invest in my future and pursue new opportunities. I enrolled in business courses, eager to expand my knowledge and skills. With each passing day, I felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. The scars of the past remained, a reminder of the trials I had overcome, but they no longer held power over me. I had emerged from the darkness stronger and more resilient than ever before. As I looked towards the horizon, I felt a sense of gratitude wash over me. The road ahead was uncertain, but I faced it with courage and optimism, with my loved ones by my side and a newfound sense of purpose guiding me forward. I knew that the best was yet to come. Rehabilitation was a slow and arduous process, filled with pain and frustration. But amidst the challenges, there was a glimmer of light. Anna. Anna was a physical therapist with a gentle touch and a warm smile. From the moment we met, there was a connection between us, a spark that ignited something deep within my soul. As we worked together, Anna's kindness and compassion became a beacon of hope in my darkest days. She pushed me to my limits, encouraging me to persevere even when the pain seemed unbearable. One afternoon, as I struggled through a particularly grueling session, Anna's voice rang out like a lifeline. "You're doing great, Steve," she said, her eyes filled with genuine admiration. "I know it's tough, but you're making incredible progress." Her words were like music to my ears, filling me with a sense of pride and determination. With Anna by my side, I felt invincible, ready to tackle any obstacle that stood in my way. As the weeks passed, our professional relationship slowly blossomed into something more. We shared stories and laughter, our conversations flowing effortlessly as we worked towards a common goal. One day, as we sat together during a break, Anna turned to me with a playful glint in her eyes. "You know, Steve," she said, her smile lighting up the room, "I think you're starting to enjoy these sessions a little too much." I chuckled, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. "Maybe I am," I admitted, meeting her gaze with a twinkle in my eye. "But it's not just the therapy that I enjoy. It's the company, too." Anna's cheeks flushed pink, and she looked away shyly. "Well, I'm glad to hear that," she murmured, her voice soft and sincere. In that moment, something shifted between us, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had been growing between us. It was a feeling unlike anything I had ever experienced before, a sense of connection and belonging that filled me with a newfound sense of hope. As the days turned into weeks, Anna's support became the cornerstone of my recovery. Her unwavering positivity and encouragement lifted my spirits, inspiring me to push through the pain and keep moving forward. With Anna by my side, I felt stronger and more determined than ever before. Together, we faced each challenge head-on, united in our shared goal of overcoming adversity and reclaiming our lives. And as I looked towards the future, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the remarkable woman who had come into my life. Anna was more than just a physical therapist. She was my guiding light, my source of strength, and my reason to believe in a brighter tomorrow. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, my bond with Anna grew stronger with each passing moment. What had started as a professional relationship had blossomed into something beautiful and profound, a love that transcended the trials of the past. One evening, as we sat together on the porch, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun, Anna turned to me with a tender smile. "Steve," she said, her voice filled with warmth, "I've been thinking a lot about our future lately." I looked at her, a surge of emotion swelling in my chest. "Me too," I admitted, reaching out to take her hand in mine. "I can't imagine my life without you, Anna." Her eyes sparkled with joy, and she squeezed my hand gently. "I feel the same way, Steve, but I know we both carry scars from our pasts, and I want to make sure we're building our future on a strong foundation." I nodded, a sense of determination coursing through my veins. "I couldn't agree more, Anna. I want us to be honest and open with each other, to communicate openly and trust one another completely." Anna's smile widened, her gaze unwavering. "That's exactly what I want too, Steve. I believe we can overcome anything as long as we face it together." And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the evening, we made a silent vow to each other, to leave behind the pain of the past and embrace the promise of the future. In the days that followed, we began to make plans, practical plans for our life together, filled with hope and possibility. We talked about finding a place of our own, a sanctuary where we could build a life filled with love and laughter. But more than that, we talked about our dreams, the dreams we had put on hold for far too long. We dreamed of traveling the world, exploring new places and cultures hand in hand. We dreamed of starting a family, of watching our children grow and thrive in a home filled with warmth and love. And with each dream we shared, our bond grew stronger, our hearts intertwined in a tapestry of hope and possibility. As we looked towards the future, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the remarkable woman who had come into my life. Anna was more than just my partner. She was my confidant, my soulmate, and my greatest source of strength. And as we embarked on this new chapter of our lives together, I knew that with Anna by my side, anything was possible. Together, we would face whatever challenges lay ahead, united in our love and unwavering in our commitment to each other. Life had begun to settle into a comfortable rhythm, the wounds of the past slowly healing with each passing day. Anna and I were building a future together, one filled with hope and possibility. But just as we started to find our footing, a new challenge emerged, one that would test our resolve and push us to our limits. It was a crisp autumn morning when I received the unexpected assignment. My senior partner, John, called me into his office with a grave expression. "Steve, I need to talk to you about a new case," he said, his voice tinged with urgency. I frowned, curiosity piqued. "What's going on, John?" He leaned back in his chair, a troubled look in his eyes. "It's your former employer, Steve. They're in financial distress, and they've requested our help." My heart skipped a beat as the implications of his words sank in. My former employer, the same company that had caused me so much pain and turmoil, was now in need of assistance. The irony was not lost on me. John continued, his tone serious. "I know it's a delicate situation, Steve, but your previous connections could be an asset in this case. We need someone with insider knowledge to uncover the root of their issues and present a viable solution." I hesitated, torn between my personal history with the company and my professional obligations. The potential conflict of interest was glaringly obvious, but John seemed convinced that I was the right person for the job. After a moment of contemplation, I nodded resolutely. "I understand, John. I'll do whatever it takes to get to the bottom of this." As I left John's office, a sense of unease settled over me. Returning to the company that had caused me so much pain felt like stepping into the lion's den. But I was determined to see it through, not just for the sake of my career, but for the sake of the employees who were counting on me to find a solution. Over the coming days, I delved into the intricacies of the company's financial situation, poring over spreadsheets and reports in search of clues. The more I uncovered, the more troubled I became. It was clear that the company was teetering on the brink of collapse, and the reasons behind their financial woes were far more complex than I had initially anticipated. But amidst the chaos, there was a glimmer of hope, a possibility for redemption. If I could pinpoint the root of their issues and present a viable solution, perhaps I could help steer the company back on course. As I worked tirelessly to unravel the mysteries of the company's downfall, I couldn't help but wonder what Anna would think of my involvement in this case. Would she understand the complexities of the situation, or would she see it as a betrayal of our shared values? But one thing was certain: I couldn't face this challenge alone. With Anna by my side, I knew that together, we could weather any storm that came our way. And as I prepared to confront the demons of my past once more, I took solace in the knowledge that no matter what lay ahead, I would not face it alone. Investigating my former employer was like stepping back in time, each discovery dredging up memories I had long buried. But with Anna by my side, and a team of dedicated colleagues supporting me, I forged ahead, determined to see the case through to its conclusion. As we delved deeper into the company's financial affairs, it became apparent that the mismanagement ran far deeper than we had initially suspected. Transactions were murky, funds were unaccounted for, and the web of deceit grew more tangled with each passing day. But amidst the chaos, there were moments of clarity, breakthroughs that brought us one step closer to uncovering the truth. With each piece of evidence we unearthed, the puzzle began to take shape, revealing a damning portrait of corruption and greed. The final confrontation with my former boss was intense, a battle of wills that tested my resolve to its limits. But as I stood face to face with the man who had once held power over me, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. This was no longer the broken man he had betrayed years ago. This was a survivor, a fighter who had risen from the ashes stronger and more determined than ever before. As the dust settled and the case drew to a close, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. From a betrayed and broken man to someone who had rebuilt his life from the ground up, I had weathered the storm and emerged on the other side, battered but unbroken. And as I looked towards the future, I felt a surge of hope and determination. With Anna by my side and the promise of a new beginning on the horizon, I knew that anything was possible. The scars of the past would always be a part of me, but they no longer defined me. I was ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead, confident in my ability to overcome them with grace and resilience. As the sun set on another chapter of my life, I smiled, filled with gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this moment. Full circle, indeed, and ready for whatever the future may hold.